I stood alone in court. He laughed. "You're a penniless housewife," he sneered. I opened my bag. Pulled out the red notebook. His lawyer screamed, "Stop her." The judge froze. "Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. They called me a dead woman walking. In the hallways of the New York Supreme Court, the clerks whispered that I was a lamb wandering voluntarily into a slaughterhouse, begging for the blade. In the cutthroat, blood-soaked world of high-stakes divorce litigation, you simply do not represent yourself against a shark like Sterling Cross. It is unheard of. It is suicide. It is especially insane when he has hired Preston Hayes, the deadliest lawyer in the city, a man known as the Butcher because he doesn't just win cases, he debons his opponents and leaves their reputations to rot in the sun. Everyone in Department 42 expected a massacre that morning. The gallery was packed with reporters, curious legal interns, and the sharks of Wall Street who wanted to see the final humiliation of Meredith Vance. They expected me to cry. They expected me to sign the papers with a trembling hand, apologize for wasting their time, and disappear into the poverty I came from. Sterling certainly did. He sat there, radiant in his arrogance, looking every inch the billionaire CEO of Sterling Dynamics. He even laughed out loud when I stood up. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a rich, throaty sound that bounced off the mahogany walls, the sound of a man who had never lost a day in his life. He leaned back in his Italian leather chair, smoothing the lapel of a charcoal suit that cost more than my father made in 5 years. He turned to Preston Hayes and whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. "Look at her, Preston. She is wearing that dress I bought her for a charity gala 5 years ago. The hem is fraying. It is pathetic. She thinks she is in a movie." Preston Hayes did not laugh. He was a man with silver hair and eyes like chipped flint, cold and unmoving. He just smirked, tapping his gold fountain pen against the heavy oak table in a rhythmic, predatory beat. "Let her play pretend, Sterling," Preston murmured, his voice like dry leaves. "It makes the kill easier. Judge Miller hates time wasters. She will be held in contempt before we break for lunch." Across the aisle at the plaintiff's table sat me. I felt incredibly small. The courtroom air conditioning was blasting, chilling the sweat on the back of my neck. Unlike the defense table, which was cluttered with paralegals, expensive laptops, stacks of bound evidence, and crystal water pitchers, my table was desolate. It was empty save for a single yellow legal pad, a cheap ballpoint pen, and a plastic cup of lukewarm water I had filled from the fountain in the hallway. I kept my head down, staring at the scratches on the wood of the table. I had my brown hair pulled back in a severe, sensible bun that pulled at my scalp. To the casual observer, I looked like a defeated woman. I looked like a housewife who had been discarded, traded in for a newer, shinier model, specifically Sterling's 24-year-old personal assistant, Tiffany Sparks, who I knew was sitting in the back row, wearing diamond earrings that used to be mine. "All right," the bailiff bellowed, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "All rise." The heavy door behind the bench swung open with a groan, and the Honorable Judge Arthur P. Miller swept into the room. Miller was a legend in New York. He was an old-school jurist with a face carved from granite and zero patience for theatrics. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked down at the docket with a frown that deepened into a scowl. Case number 4920. Cross versus Vance, Judge Miller grumbled, his voice gravelly. "We are here for the final hearing on asset division and spousal support. Appearances?" Preston Hayes stood up, buttoning his jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. "Preston Hayes representing the respondent, Mr. Sterling Cross, Your Honor. We are ready to proceed and hopefully conclude this unfortunate matter quickly." The judge looked to my table. "And for the petitioner?" I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh, screeching noise in the quiet room that made several people wince. Sterling chuckled again, covering his mouth with a well-manicured hand to hide his amusement. "Meredith Vance, Your Honor," I said. My voice was soft, trembling slightly at the edges. "Representing myself." Judge Miller peered over his spectacles, his eyes narrowing. He let out a long, weary exhale that signaled he was already dreading this trial. "Ms. Vance, I am going to ask you this once, and I want you to listen carefully. Your husband is the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. The marital assets in question are estimated in the tens of millions of dollars. Mr. Hayes here has been practicing law for 30 years and has written textbooks on divorce litigation. Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed pro se?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave. "You are bringing a plastic butter knife to a nuclear war, madam. The court cannot offer you legal advice." "I cannot afford an attorney, Your Honor," I said, looking down at my hands, twisting my wedding ring tan line. "Sterling cut off my access to the joint account 6 months ago. I have $38 in my checking account." Preston Hayes shot up like a jack-in-the-box. "Objection. Your Honor, Mr. Cross merely secured the assets to prevent frivolous, vindictive spending. We offered Ms. Vance a generous settlement of $50,000 to cover her transition back to her previous lifestyle. She refused it out of spite." "50,000, the judge repeated, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "For an estate of this size? That barely covers the retainer for a decent lawyer in this city." "It is more than she came into the marriage with," Preston said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescension. "She was a waitress when they met, Your Honor. She has no financial literacy. She barely finished college. We are trying to protect the estate from mismanagement." "I see," the judge said. He looked at me, and his expression softened into pity. It was the look you give a stray dog you know you can't feed. "Ms. Vance, I strongly advise you to reconsider the settlement. If you proceed, you will be held to the same standards as a practicing attorney. I will not hold your hand. If you fail to object, evidence gets in. If you fail to file the right motions, you lose. Do you understand the gravity of your position?" I looked up. For a split second, the fear in my eyes seemed to vanish, replaced by something colder, harder, something ancient. But it was gone so fast Sterling missed it. He was too busy checking his watch. "I understand, Your Honor," I said, my voice gaining a fraction more steel. "I am ready." Sterling leaned over to Preston, grinning. "Watch this. She is going to cry in 10 minutes. I give her 15 minutes before she begs for the 50 grand. "Ms. Vance," the judge said, checking the clock. "Your opening statement. Keep it brief. I have a murder trial starting at 2. I walked around the table. I did not go to the podium. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the aisle, clutching my yellow notepad against my chest like a shield. I looked at Sterling. I looked at the man who had promised to love me until death do us part, the man who had turned my life into a prison. And I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has just heard the trap snap shut. To understand why I stood in that courtroom alone, you have to understand the girl I was 12 years ago. I wasn't Meredith Vance, the billionaire's discarded wife. I was just Meredith, a 23-year-old accounting student with a bright future that was rapidly dimming under the weight of duty. I lived in Queens, in a small, weathered house that smelled of old wood and lavender. It sat on a plot of land right on the waterfront, a slice of history that had been in the Vance family for 4 generations. While glass skyscrapers and luxury condos sprouted up around us like weeds, our house remained a stubborn relic of the past. My father, Walter Vance, was the guardian of that land. He was a proud man, a retired dockworker with calloused hands and a heart that was slowly failing him. "This is our home, Mary," he would say, coughing into his handkerchief until it came away speckled with red. They offer millions, but they don't understand. History matters more than money. We don't sell our roots. But roots don't pay for chemotherapy. Roots don't pay for the specialized radiation treatments Walter needed. I dropped out of NYU in my final semester, giving up my dream of becoming a CPA. I worked double shifts at a diner called the Blue Plate, serving eggs and coffee to construction workers and businessmen, my feet aching so bad I cried every night. The developers were vultures. They knew my father was dying. They sent men in slick suits to knock on our door at all hours. They offered cash. Then they offered threats. The city will condemn it anyway, they sneered. Sell now or get nothing. I was drowning in bills. The final notice letters piled up on the kitchen table like snowdrifts. I was terrified. That was when Sterling Cross walked into the diner. He wasn't a billionaire back then, just a millionaire on the rise, the CEO of a logistics startup. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way that I mistook for confidence. He had blue eyes that seemed to see right through my stained apron. He ordered black coffee and asked why a girl who could calculate a check in her head faster than the register was wiping tables. I told him my story. I was exhausted, vulnerable, and desperate for someone to listen. He started coming in every day. He left $100 tips. He brought specialized vitamins for my dad. He brought flowers. He was my Prince Charming. When the bank threatened to foreclose on our house because of the unpaid medical loans, Sterling stepped in. He wrote a check for the arrears, $40,000, without blinking. Consider it an investment in you, he said, kissing my hand over the Formica table. You're special, Meredith. You deserve better than this struggle. I fell in love. Hard. I thought he was my savior sent from God. I introduced him to my father. Dad was skeptical at first. He didn't trust men who wore suits on weekends, but even he was charmed by Sterling's respectful demeanor and his sudden interest in preserving the Vance family heritage. Then came the night that shattered my world. August 15th. A rainy Tuesday. Dad had gone out to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. He liked the walk, said the rain helped him breathe. He never came back. The police came to the door at midnight. A hit and run. A black SUV, speeding, had jumped the curb 2 blocks from our house. The driver never stopped. My father died instantly. I broke. I fell to the floor and screamed until my throat bled. I was 24, an orphan, and completely alone. Or so I thought. Sterling was there before the ambulance even left. He held me while I shook. He identified the body so I wouldn't have to. He planned the funeral. He handled the police report. He was my rock, my fortress. I'll take care of you, Meredith, he whispered at the graveside, the rain mingling with my tears as his arm tightened around my waist. You never have to worry about anything again. Marry me, and let me protect you. 6 months later, we were married. I didn't care about a prenup. I didn't care about his money. I just wanted to be safe. I signed whatever papers he put in front of me, trusting him completely. I moved into his penthouse in Manhattan. I left the little house in Queens behind, though Sterling insisted we keep the deed in my name for sentimental reasons. I was so grateful. I didn't know then that the sentimental reason was a zoning loophole that required a family member to hold the title for a commercial merger. I was so blind. I didn't see the way he looked at the land, not at me. I didn't see that I wasn't a wife to him. I was an acquisition. And like any acquisition, once the deal was closed, the asset was meant to be shelved. The first year of our marriage was a blur of black tie galas, charity dinners, and the flash of cameras. To the outside world, I was Cinderella. I had married the prince. I lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. I had a closet full of designer clothes. But inside that penthouse, the air was thin, and the walls were made of ice. I tried to be the perfect wife. I learned which fork to use for the salad, how to make small talk with senators about golf, and how to ignore the way Sterling's hand would tighten painfully on my arm if I laughed too loud or expressed an opinion he hadn't approved. "You don't need to work, darling," Sterling said when I mentioned going back to finish my accounting degree. He was tying his tie in the mirror, not looking at me. "It looks bad for the company if my wife is taking exams like a common student. It implies I can't provide for you. Just enjoy your life. Go shopping." So I stopped. I stopped reading financial news. I stopped looking at spreadsheets. I became a decoration. But a decoration has no purpose, and isolation breeds darkness. Sterling was always working. He built Sterling Dynamics from a mid-sized logistics firm into a global empire. He was ruthless. I heard him on the phone late at night in his study, screaming at competitors, destroying lives with a few words, his voice cold and terrifying. But he was always sweet to me, until the baby. 3 years into our marriage, I got pregnant. I was overjoyed. I thought a child would bring the warmth back into our cold, marble penthouse. I decorated the nursery in soft yellows. I bought tiny clothes. I dreamed of a family. But Sterling was annoyed. "It's not a good time, Meredith," he said, staring at his reflection in the mirror while I showed him the ultrasound pictures. "The market is volatile. A child is a distraction. And frankly, you aren't ready to be a mother. You're too emotional." The stress was unbearable. Sterling started staying out late. He stopped coming home for dinner. I was 6 months pregnant when I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a diamond bracelet, a bracelet I never received. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He exploded. He threw a crystal tumbler against the wall, shards of glass flying everywhere, cutting my cheek. "You are suffocating me," he screamed, his face twisted in a way I had never seen. "You ungrateful, clingy woman. I gave you a life most women would kill for, and you whine about receipts? Grow up." That night, I woke up in pain. Terrible, cramping pain that tore through my abdomen. I was bleeding. I called for Sterling, but he wasn't there. He had gone out to cool off. I called 911 myself, sobbing on the bathroom floor. I lost the baby. A little boy. I woke up in the hospital, empty and broken. Sterling was sitting in the chair next to the bed, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look sad. He looked relieved. "It's for the best, really," he said, not even looking up from his emails. "We don't need complications right now. Plus, heirs make estate planning messy. The doctors said you were under too much stress. You see? You did this to yourself." Something inside me snapped that day. But it wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a heart turning to stone. I didn't scream. I just stared at him, realizing for the first time that I was sleeping next to a monster. After the miscarriage, I fell into a deep depression. I couldn't sleep. I wandered the penthouse like a ghost. That's when Sterling brought in Dr. Lloyd Finch. "He's the best psychiatrist in the city," Sterling told me. "He'll help you fix your head." Dr. Finch was a small, oily man with cold hands and eyes that never blinked enough. He didn't ask me about my grief. He asked me if I heard voices. He asked me if I felt paranoid. He prescribed pills, heavy, blue pills that made my tongue feel like lead and my memories foggy. "She's suffering from postpartum psychosis mixed with delusional disorder," Dr. Finch told Sterling in the hallway. I heard them through the crack in the door. "She needs to be sedated, Mr. Cross. For her own safety. And yours." Sterling started treating me like an invalid. "Did you take your medicine, Meredith?" he would ask every morning. You're looking manic today. He started gaslighting me. Items would move around the house. My keys would disappear from the hook and reappear in the fridge. Important documents regarding the house in Queens would vanish. You lost them again, Meredith, Sterling would sigh, looking at me with fake pity. Your memory is shot. You're getting worse. Maybe Dr. Finch needs to up the dosage. I started to believe him. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was broken. For 2 years, I lived in a fog, a medicated zombie in a gilded cage. I would have stayed that way forever, drugged and docile, if it wasn't for a simple, technological mistake. It was a Tuesday, gray and rainy, eerily similar to the day my father died. Sterling was in London for a business trip, a merger deal he said would define his career. I was home alone, supposedly resting. The maid, usually hovering, had called in sick with the flu, leaving the massive penthouse silent. I decided to clean Sterling's study myself. I needed to move, to do something to clear the cobwebs in my brain. I was dusting the high bookshelves when I found an old iPad tucked behind a row of leather-bound encyclopedias. It was dusty, clearly forgotten. I pressed the home button. It still had a 10% charge. It turned on. And then, it dinged. Sterling, in his supreme arrogance, had linked his iMessage account to all his devices years ago and never unlinked this one. Because the iPad was connected to the penthouse Wi-Fi, it was receiving every text message he was sending and receiving in real time from London. I sat down on the Persian rug, the feather duster falling from my hand. I watched the messages scroll down the screen. Contact, Tiffany Sparks, my husband's assistant. Tiffany, did the cow sign the papers yet? Sterling, not yet. I need Dr. Finch to up her dosage. She needs to be completely out of it before the annual board meeting. Tiffany, I want that house in the Hamptons, Sterling. You promised. And I want the sapphire necklace back. I hate that she wears it in the family portrait. Sterling, patience, babe. Once I declare her mentally incompetent, I get power of attorney over everything. Including the Queensland. Then we dump her in that facility upstate. The one with the high walls. She won't be a problem anymore. She'll just be a sad story. Tiffany, send me a pic. I miss you. Sterling sent a photo. It was him and Tiffany, lying in a hotel bed in London, drinking champagne. But it wasn't the nudity that made me vomit. It was what Tiffany was wearing. Around her neck was my mother's pearl necklace. The one Sterling said had been lost during the move 3 years ago. The one I had cried over for weeks. He had stolen it and given it to his mistress. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. It started in my chest, a burning, molten sensation that seared through the fog of the medication. The adrenaline hit my system like a lightning strike. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the iPad. I looked tired. My hair was messy. I looked like a victim. I looked like the cow they were laughing at. No, I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded strange, guttural. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but not from fear. From rage. Pure, unadulterated, blinding rage. I went to the bathroom and flushed every single blue pill down the toilet. I watched them swirl away, carrying my sedation with them. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked at myself for the first time in years. You are Meredith Vance, I said to the glass. You were top of your class in accounting. You survived the death of your father. You survived the loss of your son. You are not a cow. You are not crazy. I had a choice. I could confront him when he came home. I could scream and cry and throw the iPad at his head. But if I did that, he would win. He had the doctors, the lawyers, and the money. He would just call the police and say I was having a psychotic break. I would be in a straitjacket before dinner, and he would have exactly what he wanted. No. I needed a plan. I needed to be smarter. I needed to become the thing he feared most, a woman who knows her worth and knows his secrets. I walked back to the study. I didn't smash the iPad. I carefully plugged it into a charger, hid it back behind the books, and turned off the sound notification. Then, I went to the library ladder and climbed to the top shelf. I pulled out my old college textbooks, covered in dust. I hadn't looked at a balance sheet in 10 years. But as I opened the pages, the numbers didn't look like foreign hieroglyphics anymore. They looked like weapons. And I was going to war. For the next 6 months, I gave the performance of a lifetime. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. When Sterling came home, I had to be the doting, confused wife. I pretended to take the pills, tucking them under my tongue and spitting them out later in the bathroom sink. I deliberately misplaced my keys so he would smirk and shake his head. I let him gaslight me, agreeing when he said the sky was green or that I had forgotten our dinner plans. "You're getting worse, Meredith," he would say, stroking my hair with faux concern. "Maybe we should look at residential care." "No, please," I would whimper, playing the part. "I'll be better. I promise." But at night, when he was asleep or away on business, the actress vanished, and the investigator emerged. I bought a cheap burner laptop with cash I had slowly siphoned from the grocery budget and hid it under the loose floorboards of the guest closet. I spent hours online, relearning forensic accounting. I studied divorce law until my eyes burned and the words blurred together. I learned about shell companies, offshore trusts, and hidden assets. I tracked his flights, his credit card expenses, his meetings. I knew I couldn't do it entirely alone. I needed a legal mind, but I couldn't hire a high-profile lawyer. Sterling tracked every penny in our joint accounts, and a large withdrawal would trigger an alert on his phone. So I reached out to Sarah, my old roommate from NYU. Sarah hadn't become a corporate shark, she was a paralegal at a nonprofit legal aid clinic in Brooklyn. We met in dingy coffee shops, me wearing a wig and sunglasses, looking over my shoulder every few seconds. Sarah was horrified when I told her the story. "Meredith, this is dangerous," Sarah whispered, clutching her coffee cup, her eyes wide. "Sterling isn't just a bad husband. He's a criminal. If he catches you..." "He won't catch me," I said, my voice hard. "But I need you to tell me how to record him legally. I need him on tape." "New York is a one-party consent state," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it. But if you plant a bug in a room you aren't in, that's a felony. It's wiretapping." "What about the car?" I asked. "The Mercedes. It's titled in my name. I pay the insurance. He just drives it." Sarah grinned, a wicked glint in her eye. "If it's your property, there's a gray area. It's risky. But if you own the car, you can argue you have a right to secure it." I took the risk. I bought digital voice recorders the size of a thumb drive. I sewed one into the lining of his favorite briefcase. I taped another under the driver's seat of the Mercedes. I became a ghost in my own house. I listened to hours of audio. Most of it was boring business meetings or him flirting with Tiffany. But then, I struck gold. I heard him talking to Preston Hayes, his lawyer, while they were driving to the golf course. Recording, November 12th. "Sterling, the audit is coming up. I need to move the $4 million from the pension fund before the SEC sniffs around. If they see the hole in the accounts, I'm done. Preston, relax. Move it to the Cayman account. Blue Ocean Holdings. Use Tiffany's name as the signatory. If anyone asks, it's a consulting fee for logistical analysis. No one checks the consultants. Sterling and Meredith? She's asking questions about the house in Queens again. Preston, don't worry. Dr. Finch has the paperwork ready. The moment you file for divorce, we file for an emergency conservatorship. We present the medical history, the pills, the episodes. She'll be in the asylum, and you'll be the trustee of her estate. We'll sell the land the next day. It's clean. I listened to that recording with headphones on, sitting in the dark laundry room, hiding behind a pile of towels. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the recorder. They weren't just going to leave me. They were going to erase me. They were going to lock me away until I died so they could spend my father's land money. I needed more. The recording was good, but it might be inadmissible if they argued I planted it illegally. I needed hard evidence. I needed the paper trail. And I knew exactly where Sterling kept it. Sterling was arrogant, but he was also paranoid. He didn't trust the cloud with his darkest secrets. He kept a physical ledger. He called it his insurance policy. It was a small, leather-bound red notebook that he kept in a wall safe behind the painting of a ship in his home office. I knew the safe was there. I had seen him open it once when he was drunk on scotch. But I didn't know the combination. I waited until he went to St. Bart's with Tiffany for a marketing retreat. I had 3 days. 3 days to crack the safe or lose my life. I stood in front of the safe, the painting of the ship leaning against the desk. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I tried his birthday. Beep beep beep. Error. I tried our anniversary. Error. I tried his social security number. Error. Sweat dripped down my back. I sat back in his leather chair, frustrated. Think, Meredith. Think like a narcissist. What does Sterling love most in the world? Himself? Money? Power? I remembered a dinner party where he bragged that the day Sterling Dynamics went public on the stock market was the day he truly was born. I typed in the date. April 12, 15. Click. The mechanical whir of the lock sounded like music. The heavy steel door swung open. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. There was no cash inside, just stacks of hard drives and the red notebook. I took the book to the desk and turned on the brass lamp. My hands were trembling violently as I opened the cover. It wasn't just a ledger. It was a diary of sins. It cataloged bribes to city officials, illegal dumping permits in the Hudson River, and blackmail schemes against rivals going back 20 years. But as I flipped to the entries from 12 years ago, the year my father died, the world stopped spinning. Entry, August 14th. Target, Walter Vance. He won't sell. He claims the land is sacred to his family. He's becoming a nuisance. We need a workaround. Entry, August 15th. Problem solved. The old man wouldn't get out of the road. PH was driving. It was messy but effective. Police report filed as a hit and run. I paid off the responding officer. No witnesses. We own the girl now. I gasped, a ragged, choking sound that felt like it tore my throat. I read the initials again. PH, Preston Hayes. My father hadn't died of an accident. He hadn't just been unlucky. He had been murdered. Run down in the street like an animal by Sterling's lawyer, so Sterling could marry me and seize the land. The romance, the flowers, the way Sterling had accidentally walked into the diner, it was all a lie. Every kiss, every touch, every I love you was built on the blood of my father. I was sleeping with the man who ordered my father's execution. I felt like throwing up. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved until my ribs ached. I wanted to burn the house down. I wanted to grab a kitchen knife and wait for Sterling to come home and end it. But then I looked at my father's photo in my locket. He looked so kind, so gentle. He wouldn't want me to go to prison for murder. He would want justice. He would want them to lose everything. I washed my face. I went back to the safe. I photographed every single page of the notebook. I copied the hard drives. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Sterling came home 2 days later, tanned and smelling of Tiffany's cheap coconut perfume. He kissed me on the cheek. "Missed you, darling," he lied. "Missed you too," I lied back. And for the first time, my smile reached my eyes. Because I wasn't looking at my husband anymore. I was looking at a dead man walking. And I was the executioner. Now, back to the courtroom. Back to the moment Sterling laughed at me. Back to the moment Preston Hayes sneered. I stood in the aisle, clutching my yellow pad. The judge was waiting. The court reporter's hands hovered over the keys. The air in the room was thick with expectation, the expectation of my failure. "Mrs. Cross?" Judge Miller prompted, checking his watch again. "We are waiting." I took a deep breath. I walked toward the bench, ignoring the podium. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and steady, projecting to the back of the room. "My husband, Mr. Cross, says I did nothing during our marriage. He says I was just a waitress." "That is true. I was a waitress at the Blue Diner when we met. I served coffee and pie." Sterling rolled his eyes theatrically. "Here comes the sob story," he muttered to Preston. "Get the tissues." "But," I continued, pivoting to face him, my eyes locking onto his. "The law in this state speaks of a partnership. It speaks of good faith. Sterling is asking you to believe that he built Sterling Dynamics alone. He is asking you to believe that the $50 million in the Vanguard Trust does not exist." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Preston Hayes's head snapped up. Sterling froze, his hand halfway to his water glass. The water sloshed over the rim, staining the table. "The what trust?" Judge Miller asked, leaning forward, his glasses slipping down his nose. "The Vanguard Trust, Your Honor," I said, my voice rising. "And the shell company in the Cayman Islands registered as Blue Ocean Holdings. And the 3 commercial properties in Seattle purchased under the name of his personal driver, Mr. Cooper." Sterling's face went from smug to purple in the span of 3 seconds. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound like a gunshot. "That is a lie. She is lying." "Objection. Mr. Cross, sit down." The judge barked, banging his gavel. He turned his gaze to me. The pity was gone, replaced by sharp, predatory interest. "Ms. Vance, those are serious allegations. Alleging hidden assets without proof is a quick way to get your case dismissed and pay the other side's legal fees. Do you have proof?" "I know, Your Honor," I said. I walked back to my table and picked up a single document. I do not have a law degree, but I do know how to read a bank transfer. And I know how to track an IP address. I handed a paper to the bailiff. "Marked as Exhibit A," I said softly. Preston Hayes snatched the copy from the bailiff before he could even hand it to the judge. His eyes scanned the page. It was a wire transfer record, a transfer of $4 million from Sterling Dynamics to a generic account in the Caymans, signed digitally by Sterling Cross. Preston looked at Sterling. "You told me the accounts were clean," he hissed. "You said you scrubbed them." "They are." Sterling whispered frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. "That account is encrypted. There is no way she could have that. She doesn't even know how to use a spreadsheet. She's an idiot." "Apparently not," Preston muttered. I sat back down. I looked at Sterling, and I let my gaze linger. I wanted him to see me. Really see me. Not the waitress. Not the crazy wife. But the accountant who had balanced the books. Call your first witness, Ms. Vance, the judge said, his tone respectful now. I call Mr. Bennett Sanders to the stand, I announced. Bennett Sanders was the CFO of Sterling Dynamics. He was a nervous man with a twitchy eye and a suit that cost more than my father's house. He had come to our Christmas parties for 10 years. He had eaten my roast chicken. He had laughed at my jokes. He knew I was smart, but he had chosen to forget it to keep his bonus. He walked to the stand, avoiding eye contact with Sterling. He took the oath, his hand shaking on the Bible. Mr. Sanders, I began, not using notes. I paced slowly in front of him. You manage the finances for Sterling Dynamics. Correct? I do, Sanders said, his voice tight, beads of sweat accumulating on his upper lip. Are you familiar with a software called Shadow Ledger? Sanders' face drained of color. He looked at Preston Hayes for help, but Preston was busy furiously reading the document I had just submitted, trying to find a loophole. That is an industry term, Sanders stammered. It's theoretical. Is it? I pulled a piece of paper from my stack. Because according to this internal email you sent to Mr. Cross on December 14th, sent from your encrypted server, Shadow Ledger is a dual-entry bookkeeping system designed specifically to maintain 2 sets of books. One for the IRS, and one for the owners. Is that correct? I take the 5th, Sanders blurted out. The courtroom gasped. A reporter in the back row stood up to get a better view. You cannot take the 5th Amendment in a civil divorce trial regarding corporate procedure unless you are admitting to a crime, Mr. Sanders. Judge Miller boomed. Answer the question or I will hold you in contempt. It has that capability, Sanders whispered, looking down at his shoes. I continued, relentless. On the night of December 14th, just 3 days before Sterling filed for divorce, did you oversee a transfer of $6 million labeled consulting fees to a company called Orion Group? Sterling told me to. Sanders cried out, looking at his boss in panic. He said it was for future expansion. He said it was a bridge loan. And who owns Orion Group, Bennett? I asked, my voice deadly calm. I don't know, Sanders lied. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit B. It is the Articles of Incorporation for Orion Group, registered in Nevada. I placed the document on the overhead projector. The light hummed, and the name on the registration was magnified on the wall for everyone to see. Owner, Tiffany Sparks. The courtroom erupted. Reporters started typing furiously on their phones. Someone gasped audibly. Sterling buried his face in his hands. Tiffany Sparks wasn't just his assistant. She wasn't just his mistress. She was the woman he was spending the employees' pension fund on. Order! Order! Judge Miller slammed his gavel, his face red with anger. He glared at Sterling Cross. Mr. Hayes, control your client and your witnesses, or I will start issuing sanctions that will make your head spin. This is a court of law, not a circus. Preston Hayes looked at Sterling with pure venom. You told me the girl wasn't on the paper, he hissed. You told me it was a shell company. She wasn't supposed to be. Sterling whispered back, terrified. I didn't think Meredith would find it. She knits, Preston. She knits scarves. How did she find Nevada? I returned to my table and took a sip of water. My hand was shaking violently now. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me nauseous. I looked at Sterling. He wasn't laughing anymore. He looked like a man who had walked into his own house and found a stranger sitting in his chair, holding a shotgun. But I knew this was just the beginning. Exposing the money was the easy part. The hard part was coming. Because Preston Hayes was about to stand up, and he wasn't going to talk about money. He was going to talk about my mind. He was going to try to prove I was crazy, and he had the doctor to prove it. And I had to let him do it. I had to let him think he was winning, just so I could crush him completely. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted instantly. The moment I exposed the financial fraud involving the pension fund, the air felt electric, charged with the static of scandal. But Preston Hayes was not a man who panicked over numbers. He was a man who destroyed reputations. He knew that in a divorce trial, money was just math, but sanity was subjective. If he could paint me as unreliable, as broken, then every piece of evidence I had just presented would be dismissed as the frantic fabrication of a madwoman. Preston stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket with a casual, almost bored demeanor. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the press gallery, ensuring he had their attention. "Your Honor," Preston said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, trustworthy baritone that had won him countless cases. "We would like to move past the financials for a moment. While Mr. Cross admits to some complex corporate restructuring which can be explained in due time, we must address the elephant in the room. We must address the issue of conduct. Specifically, the petitioner's mental state." I froze in my chair. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. This was the second trap. I knew it was coming, but knowing didn't make the impact any less visceral. "We called Dr. Lloyd Finch to the stand," Preston announced. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Dr. Finch walked in. He looked nothing like the sweaty, desperate man I had heard on the recordings. Today, he was the picture of medical authority. He wore a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, spectacles perched on his nose, and carried a thick leather file. He looked like a kindly grandfather, the type you would trust with your deepest secrets. He walked to the stand with a confident stride, avoiding my gaze entirely. Preston approached him like an old friend, leaning against the railing of the witness box. "Dr. Finch, thank you for coming on such short notice. Could you please state your credentials for the court?" "Certainly," Finch said, his voice grave and practiced. "I am a board-certified psychiatrist with 30 years of experience. I am the chief of psychiatry at St. Jude's Hospital and a consultant for the State Department." "Impressive," Preston nodded. "And you treated Mrs. Cross, Ms. Vance, for the past 2 years, correct?" "I did," Finch said, finally glancing at me with a look of practiced pity. "I saw her twice a week for 24 months. And what was your diagnosis, doctor?" Finch opened his file. He adjusted his glasses. "Severe paranoid delusions coupled with early-onset schizophrenia and bipolar disorder type 1. It is a tragic case, really." The courtroom went silent. I could feel the eyes on me. The reporters were scribbling furiously. "Crazy. She's crazy. That explains everything. Could you elaborate on these delusions?" Preston asked gently. "Ms. Vance believes people are stealing from her," Finch lied smoothly, looking straight at Judge Miller. "She constructs elaborate conspiracy theories to explain simple misunderstandings. She believes her husband is conspiring against her. She hallucinates conversations that never happened. She often forgets where she is for hours at a time. During our sessions, she would often claim that the television was sending her coded messages." "Did you prescribe medication?" "I did. Heavy antipsychotics. Thorazine and lithium. But..." Finch paused for dramatic effect, shaking his head sadly. "She was non-compliant. She refused to take them. She would hide them, throw them away. That is why she is here today, making these wild accusations about Cayman Islands and murder plots. It is all part of the pathology. It is a cry for help." Preston turned to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "So, Your Honor, we have a dilemma. We have a hysterical woman off her medication, making up stories to hurt a successful man. The documents she showed regarding the bank transfers? Likely forgeries created during a manic episode. I have seen patients like this create entire worlds in their heads. We ask that her evidence be stricken from the record and that she be remanded for an immediate 72-hour psychiatric evaluation." Sterling was grinning again. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He looked at me with a mixture of triumph and mockery. He thought he had won. He thought the crazy wife card trumped everything. I felt a wave of nausea crash over me. It was the same feeling I had lived with for 2 years when they gaslit me. The doubt. The fear. The voice in the back of my head whispering, maybe I am crazy. Maybe I did imagine it all. But then I touched my bag. I felt the cool, hard plastic of the USB drive. And I remembered the red notebook. I remembered the entry about my father. I remembered the sound of Sterling's voice laughing about my destruction. "Your witness, Ms. Vance," the judge said. He looked at me with deep concern, perhaps even pity. "And Ms. Vance, tread carefully. These are serious medical claims." I stood up. I didn't bring my notepad. I didn't look at the gallery. I walked right up to the witness stand until I was only a few feet away from Dr. Lloyd Finch. He flinched. Just a millimeter, but I saw it. "Hello, Lloyd," I said softly. "Ms. Vance," he nodded stiffly, clutching his file tighter. "You said I suffer from paranoid delusions. That I imagine conspiracies. Is that your professional medical opinion?" "It is," he said, his voice unwavering. "And you swore an oath? To do no harm? To speak the truth?" "I did." "Dr. Finch," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. "How is your gambling debt? Specifically, the $42,000 you owed to the Vinny the Shark Syndicate in Atlantic City?" "Objection!" Preston roared, jumping to his feet. "Relevance. This is character assassination. It goes to credibility, Your Honor." I shouted back, spinning around to face the bench, my dress swirling around me. "I am establishing a motive for perjury. I am establishing that this man was bought." Judge Miller looked from me to Preston, then to the sweating doctor. "I'll allow it." "Answer the question, doctor." Finch was sweating now. Tiny beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead. I don't know what you're talking about. That is absurd. Don't you?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I have the bank records, Lloyd. Sterling paid your debt on November 15th. A wire transfer from his personal LLC to a holding company in New Jersey. The same day you signed my affidavit of incompetence. Did you think I wouldn't check the dates?" "That's a lie." Finch squeaked, his voice cracking. "I have never been to Atlantic City." "Is it?" I walked back to my table. "Sterling thinks I'm crazy, Your Honor. He thinks I imagine things. But I don't imagine voices. I record them." I reached into my bag and pulled out the black USB drive. I held it up like a holy relic. Sterling Cross stopped breathing. I saw it happen physically. His chest just stopped moving. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure melting under the courtroom lights. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "What is that?" Preston Hayes demanded, his voice losing its smooth polish. For the first time all day, the butcher looked unsure. "Exhibit C," I said calmly. "New York is a one-party consent state for audio recording. As long as I am present in the room, I can record whatever I want. For the last 6 months of my marriage, I carried a digital voice recorder in my pocket. I recorded everything. Every dinner. Every argument. And every meeting my husband took in our bedroom while he thought I was asleep." "Objection!" Preston screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. "This is ambush. We haven't heard this tape. We cannot verify its chain of custody. This is highly irregular. You didn't disclose the doctor's testimony until this morning, Mr. Hayes, Judge Miller cut in, his voice icy and sharp. You wanted a trial by ambush? Well, you got one. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Play the tape, Ms. Vance. The bailiff walked over and took the drive from my hand. He plugged it into the court's AV system. A projection screen slowly descended from the ceiling, humming as it lowered. I looked at Sterling. He was shaking his head frantically at Preston. Do something. Stop her. Make it stop. But there was nothing Preston could do. The trap had snapped shut, and the teeth were digging in. I looked at the gallery. I saw Tiffany Sparks in the back row. She looked confused, clutching her designer handbag. She didn't know about the recordings. She didn't know that her boyfriend, her sugar daddy, was about to destroy her life along with his own. She thought she was watching a victory lap, not a funeral. This recording, I announced to the hushed room, was taken on December 20th. In our master bedroom. It is a conversation between Mr. Cross and Dr. Finch. No, Finch whispered on the stand. He looked like he was about to vomit. He gripped the railing of the witness box like he was on a sinking ship. The speakers crackled with static. And then, Sterling's voice filled the room. It was unmistakable. Arrogant. Cruel. It was the voice of the man who had tormented me. Audio playback. Sterling, she's fighting the pills, Lloyd. She's awake too much. She asked me about the bank accounts again today. Finch, I can't give her any more, Sterling. The dosage is already lethal if she takes it with alcohol. If she dies, there will be an autopsy. I can't hide a toxicology report like that. Sterling, I don't need her dead yet. I need her crazy. I need that diagnosis to stick. If she claims half the company, I'm ruined. The Orion transfer to Tiffany is messy. I need power of attorney. Finch, I signed the affidavit. Paranoid schizophrenia. It's done. No judge will believe her. But you promised to clear the Atlantic City debt. Vinny is threatening to break my legs. Sterling, consider it paid. The wire went out this morning. Just make sure she drools in court. If she tries to speak, I want her to sound like a lunatic. I want her locked up in the upstate facility by February. Then we sell the Queensland and nobody asks questions about her father's accident. Finch, you're a cold son of a bitch, Sterling. That old man didn't deserve to die like that. Sterling, laughing, I'm a businessman, Lloyd. Sentimentalities are for poor people. And Meredith? She's just a loose end. Click. The silence that followed was heavy. It was suffocating. It felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped 10 degrees. The court reporter had stopped typing. The bailiff was staring at the speakers with his mouth open. Judge Miller slowly took off his glasses. He cleaned them with a small microfiber cloth, his hands moving with deliberate, terrifying slowness. He put them back on and looked down at the defense table. Mr. Hayes, the judge said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to the back of the room like a thunderclap. Did your client just admit to bribing a medical professional to falsify a diagnosis? And, did he just imply involvement in a suspicious death regarding the petitioner's father? Preston Hayes stood up. He moved his chair 3 feet away from Sterling, physically distancing himself from the radioactive fallout. Your Honor, Preston said, his voice trembling. I was not aware of this recording. I cannot verify its authenticity. It could be a deep fake. AI technology is very advanced. It's not AI, Preston. I shouted from my table, my voice ringing out. I was there. I was hiding in the walk-in closet while they planned to ruin my life. I heard every word. I turned to Dr. Finch on the stand. Did you say that, doctor? Did you take the money? Tell the truth, Lloyd, because the FBI can trace that wire transfer in 5 minutes. Finch burst into tears. He put his head in his hands and sobbed, a wretched, broken sound. He made me do it. I owed money to bad people. He said he would kill me if I didn't help him. I didn't want to hurt her. Bailiff! Judge Miller roared, slamming his gavel down so hard it chipped the wood. Take Dr. Finch into custody immediately. Perjury. Conspiracy. And get the district attorney on the phone. Now. Nobody leaves this room. The courtroom erupted into absolute chaos. It was pandemonium. 2 bailiffs grabbed Dr. Finch, who was wailing like a child, dragging him off the witness stand. His papers scattered across the floor like confetti. Reporters were shouting questions, flashing cameras, ignoring the judge's orders for order. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Sterling. He was slumped in his chair. The arrogance was gone. The billionaire facade had crumbled, leaving behind a terrified, small man. He looked at me, and his eyes were pleading. He mouthed the word, please. Please? After he killed my father? After he killed my baby with stress? After he tried to lock me in an asylum? After he stole my mother's pearls for his mistress? I walked to the center of the room. I stood in the eye of the storm I had created, and I felt a strange, cold peace. Your Honor, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. There is one more thing. Judge Miller looked at me. He looked exhausted, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. Go on, Ms. Vance. What else could there possibly be? Sterling isn't just a fraud, I said, turning to face my husband. He is a flight risk. Objection. Sterling screamed, jumping to his feet, knocking his chair over. I am an American citizen. I have rights. I am a pillar of this community. Sit down. The judge bellowed. One more word and I will have you gagged. He booked a flight to Brazil this morning, I said calmly, holding up another document. One way. Departing from Teterboro at 6 p.m. tonight. Private jet. Tail number N4920. He emptied his personal safe this morning. I held up a printout of the flight manifest and a security log from our building. Exhibit D. I accessed his travel agent's portal an hour ago. He knew the financials were coming out today. He never planned to stay for the verdict. He was going to run and leave everyone else holding the bag. Including you, Mr. Hayes. Preston Hayes looked at the document, then looked at his client with pure disgust. You idiot, Preston whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. You booked a flight during the trial? You signed a flight manifest? I had to. Sterling cried, his voice cracking. She knows about the notebook. She knows everything. I couldn't stay. What notebook? Judge Miller asked sharply. I opened my mouth to speak, to reveal the murder, to reveal the red notebook. But then I looked at the back of the room. The heavy double doors burst open with a crash that shook the walls. It wasn't the bailiffs this time. It was a tactical team. 6 men and women in navy blue windbreakers with yellow lettering. FBI. Behind them, officers from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The lead agent, a woman with a stern face and hair pulled back in a tight bun, marched down the aisle. She moved with the authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Sterling Cross, she announced, her voice amplifying through the room. I am Special Agent Monique Ramirez. We have a federal warrant for your arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering. Sterling tried to run. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt. He scrambled over the defense table, knocking over a pitcher of water. He slipped on the wet floor, crashing down in a heap of expensive wool and shame. The agents were on him in seconds. They hauled him up, twisting his arms behind his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking, click, click, was the sweetest symphony I had ever heard. "Preston! Do something!" Sterling screamed as they dragged him away. "I pay you $1 million a year. Fix this. Call the governor." Preston Hayes stood still, smoothing his tie, watching his client being manhandled. "I'm withdrawing as counsel, Mr. Cross," he said coldly. "I don't represent fugitives. And I certainly don't represent idiots." Sterling was dragged out, kicking and screaming, past the cameras, past the shocked gallery, past Tiffany Sparks, who was now weeping into her designer handbag, realizing her free ride was over. I stood alone at the plaintiff's table. The storm had passed. The silence returned, but this time, it was the silence of victory. Narrator's note. I have to pause here for a second because I'm shaking just remembering that moment. That click of the handcuffs? Best sound in the world. If you are listening to this and feeling that fire in your chest, that satisfaction of seeing a monster get exactly what he deserves, then you are my kind of people. Please, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and comment the number 1 below. It tells me that you are standing with me, that you believe in justice, and that you are enjoying this journey. Your support keeps me going. Comment 1 now, and let's see what happens when a housewife takes over an empire. The courtroom cleared out slowly, leaving only the smell of sweat, anxiety, and the lingering echo of Sterling's screams. Judge Miller remained on the bench, rubbing his temples. He looked down at me, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. "Ms. Vance," he said. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a pro-se litigant dismantle a defense like that. You missed your calling." "I had good motivation, Your Honor," I said, gathering my papers. "Indeed. Now, we have a practical problem," Judge Miller said, leaning forward. "In light of the federal indictment and the freezing of Mr. Cross's personal assets, the company, Sterling Dynamics, is effectively headless. The stock is going to freefall the moment the market opens tomorrow morning. Thousands of jobs are at risk. The pension fund is depleted. It is going to be a bloodbath." "I know," I said. "That is why I am asking for an emergency order." "Go on." "I don't want a cash settlement," I said firmly. "I don't want the penthouse. I don't want the cars. I want the voting shares. All of them. Under the marital fraud exception and the dissipation of assets statute, I am asking the court to award me 100% of the marital estate's voting power to pay back the victims, the employees whose pensions he stole." The judge nodded slowly. "It is unorthodox. Usually, we would appoint a receiver. But a receiver will just liquidate the company and fire everyone. You want to save it?" "I want to save the people who work there," I said. "They didn't do anything wrong. They shouldn't lose their retirement because my husband bought a yacht. I am granting you an emergency conservatorship over the Sterling estate," Judge Miller ruled, banging his gavel one last time. "You are the majority shareholder, effective immediately. You are the chairwoman of the board. Good luck, Ms. Vance. You're going to need it." 2 hours later, a black town car pulled up to the gleaming glass skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The logo of Sterling Dynamics was etched in steel above the revolving doors. It used to intimidate me. It used to make me feel small. Now, it just looked like a building. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. I hadn't changed clothes. I was still wearing the frumpy 5-year-old dress with the fraying hem. But as I walked through the lobby, the atmosphere was electric with fear. Employees huddled in corners, whispering behind cupped hands. They had seen the news alerts on their phones. They knew the FBI had raided the headquarters earlier that morning. They thought the company was dead. They looked at me with confusion. Why was the ex-wife here? I walked straight to the elevator bank. I didn't have a security badge. Sterling had revoked mine 6 months ago. The security guard, a man named Joe who I had known for years, stood up. He looked nervous. "Mrs. Cross," Joe stammered. I can't let you up. The protocols." "It's Ms. Vance, Joe," I said, smiling gently. I pulled the court order from my bag. "And I'm not a visitor. I'm the owner." Joe looked at the paper, then at me. He grinned. He swiped his MasterCard. "Give 'em hell, Ms. Vance. 42nd floor." I rode the elevator up alone. The silence hummed in my ears. I wasn't just Meredith anymore. I was the executioner coming for the rest of the rats. I walked straight to the boardroom. The double mahogany doors were closed. I could hear shouting from inside. I pushed the doors open. Around the massive oval table sat 12 men. The board of directors. They were arguing loudly, phones pressed to their ears, ties loosened, suit jackets thrown over chairs. The air smelled of stale coffee and panic. "Who let you in?" barked Conrad Vance, no relation, just a cruel coincidence of naming that he always hated. Conrad was the chairman, a 70-year-old corporate raider with a face like a bulldog and a reputation for stripping companies for parts. He had helped Sterling cook the books for years. "Security! Get this woman out of here." "Sit down, Conrad," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the heated room like a razor blade. "Excuse me?" Conrad scoffed, his face turning a shade of crimson. "Do you know who I am? This is a restricted meeting. Go home and bake cookies, Meredith. Your husband is in jail and this company is under federal investigation." "And that makes me the owner," I said, sliding the court order down the polished table. It spun and stopped right in front of him. Conrad snatched the paper. He read it, his face turning the color of ash. His hands started to shake. "This is insane," he sputtered. "Miller gave you the voting rights? You have no experience. You're a housewife. We need to sell the logistics division to Amazon by tonight to save the capital. We need to liquidate." "We are not selling anything," I said, walking to the head of the table, Sterling's empty chair. I didn't sit. I stood behind it, placing my hands on the leather backrest. "And there will be no liquidation." "You can't do that," shouted another board member, a heavy-set man named Baxter who was sweating profusely. "We have a liquidity crisis." "I can," I said. "And I will. Because if you don't listen to me, I will hand over the other folder to the SEC agents who are currently downstairs seizing the servers." I reached into my tote bag. I didn't pull out the red notebook, I was saving that for Preston Hayes. Instead, I pulled out a blue folder containing the shadow ledger printouts I had decoded. "I know about the kickbacks, Conrad," I said, locking eyes with him. "I know about the construction contracts you gave to your brother-in-law for the Nevada warehouse. I know about the insider trading, Baxter. You sold 10,000 shares yesterday before the news broke." The room fell silent. They looked at me with terror. They realized I wasn't the clueless wife they had mocked at Christmas parties. I was the one who had been watching. "You are all fired," I said. "Effective immediately. Get out of my building." "You can't fire the whole board," Conrad hissed. "The stock will tank." "The stock is already tanking because of you," I said. "Now move. Before I call the agents upstairs to add 12 more sets of handcuffs to their collection." They scrambled. It was pathetic. 12 powerful men gathering their briefcases and running from one woman in a cheap dress. When they were gone, I sat down in Sterling's chair. It was too big for me, but I didn't care. I looked out the window at the city skyline. I had the company. I had the money. I had the power. But I wasn't safe yet. Because one person was missing from the equation. Preston Hayes. He hadn't been arrested at the courthouse. He had slithered away during the chaos. And he knew about the red notebook. He knew it contained the proof that he was a murderer. And he knew exactly where I was. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the office floor. The skyscraper emptied out. The frantic energy of the day dissipated, replaced by a hollow, echoing silence. The cleaners came and went, giving the executive floor a wide berth. I stayed in the office. I had work to do. I was going through files, trying to understand the depth of the mess Sterling had left behind. It was worse than I thought. The company was leveraged to the hilt. The pension fund was empty. It was 11 p.m. The building was silent. I was alone on the 42nd floor. The city lights twinkled below me like diamonds, cold and distant. I felt a chill. The kind of primal instinct that tells a gazelle a lion is in the grass. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I looked at the security monitors on the desk. The lobby was empty. The elevators were still. But then, I saw it. On the camera feed for the emergency stairwell on the 40th floor, a shadow moved. A man. He was limping slightly, climbing the stairs. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a dark trench coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But I recognized the limp. Preston Hayes had a bad knee from a skiing accident in Aspen years ago. He always favored his left leg when he was tired. He was coming for me. I realized with a jolt of horror that he must have bribed the night security or used an old master keycard that hadn't been deactivated yet. He wasn't here to negotiate. He wasn't here to offer a settlement. He was here to finish what he started 12 years ago with my father. He knew I had the red notebook. He knew that while the FBI had Sterling on fraud, only the notebook linked Preston directly to the hit and run. Without that book, he walked free. With it, he got life in prison or the death penalty. I grabbed the red notebook from my bag. I grabbed my phone to call 911. No signal. I stared at the screen. SOS only. The jammers. Preston must have activated the boardroom's privacy jammers on his way up. He was thorough. He was the butcher for a reason. I was trapped on the 42nd floor with a killer, and no one knew I was here. I ran to the main office door and locked it. It was a heavy mahogany door, but it wouldn't hold for long against a determined man. I looked around for a weapon. A letter opener? A heavy stapler? A bottle of scotch? Then I remembered the pepper spray I had bought after the divorce started. A small canister of military-grade gel. I gripped it in my hand, my palm sweating against the metal. Thump. 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 Footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. The sound of a predator who knows his prey has nowhere to go. Meredith, Preston's voice called out. It wasn't his courtroom voice. It was raspy, terrifying, echoing off the marble floors. I know you're in there. Be reasonable. Give me the book, and you can walk out of here. You have the company. You have the money. Why do you care about an old man who died a decade ago? He was my father. I screamed through the door, my voice shaking with rage. And you murdered him. It was business, Preston replied calmly. He was an obstacle. Just like you are becoming. Don't make this messy, Meredith. I hate messes. The doorknob rattled. Then, a loud crash. He was kicking it. The wood splintered around the lock. I looked at the window. Floor-to-ceiling glass. 42 stories down. No escape. I had to fight. The door splintered inward with a deafening crack. Preston Hayes burst into the room. He looked deranged. His silver hair was messy, sticking up in tufts. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. He held a gun, a small, silver pistol fitted with a silencer. It looked like a toy, but I knew it was deadly. He looked like a cornered rat, dangerous and unpredictable. "Give it to me," he snarled, pointing the gun at my chest. His hand was shaking slightly. I held the red notebook up. "You want this? This is what you're killing for? A book? It's my life!" Preston shouted. "Hand it over." "Come and get it," I said. I threw the notebook, not at him, but across the room, toward the open window of the balcony terrace. The wind caught the pages, fluttering them like wings. Preston's greed took over. His eyes followed the book. He panicked, thinking it was going to fly out into the night and be lost forever. In that split second of distraction, I lunged. I didn't go for the gun. I went for his eyes. I raised the canister and sprayed the pepper spray directly into his face from 2 feet away. A stream of bright orange gel hit him square in the eyes and nose. "Arg!" Preston screamed, a primal sound of agony. He dropped the gun as he clawed at his burning eyes. He stumbled back, crashing into the wet bar, sending crystal glasses shattering to the floor. I didn't wait. I grabbed the notebook from the floor where it had landed. I hadn't thrown it out the window, just near it, and I ran. I bolted past him, my bare feet slipping on the broken glass. I felt a sharp slice in my heel, but I couldn't stop. I ran out the door and into the hallway. "You bitch!" Preston roared blindly behind me. "I'll kill you. You're dead." I sprinted for the elevators. I hit the button repeatedly. Nothing. The lights were dead. He had cut the power to the elevators from the master panel in the hallway. The stairs. I had to use the stairs. I pushed open the heavy stairwell door and started running down. My feet were bleeding now, leaving small red footprints on the concrete. The stairwell was cold and echoed with my ragged breathing. I could hear him above me. He was stumbling, cursing, crashing into the walls, but he was coming. The pain had made him faster, fueled by a terrifying, murderous rage. "You can't hide, Meredith," his voice echoed down the concrete shaft like a demon. "I know this building better than you. I designed the security system. I'm going to find you." I reached the 30th floor. I was gasping for air. My chest felt like it was on fire. I needed to get to the lobby. But if he cut the elevators, he probably locked the lobby doors too. I would be trapped in the atrium. I needed a signal. I needed help. I burst out of the stairwell onto the 20th floor, the server room level. It was cold and humming with machines. Blue lights blinked in the darkness. I ran to the fire alarm on the wall. I pulled it. Nothing. No bell. No lights. He had disabled the alarms. He had planned this perfectly. It was going to be a suicide. Distraught wife jumps from office balcony after the stress of the trial. Or a tragic fire. I kept running. 15th floor. 10th floor. My legs were turning to jelly. My lungs were burning. But I couldn't stop. The monster was right behind me. I reached the lobby level. I burst through the stairwell door and stumbled into the cavernous atrium. It was dark, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the massive glass facade. It looked like a tomb. I ran to the main entrance. I pushed against the revolving doors. Locked. Magnetic locks engaged. I grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the reception desk and smashed it against the glass with all my strength. Thud. It bounced off harmlessly. Bulletproof glass. Of course. Sterling was paranoid about protesters. The fortress he built to keep people out was now keeping me in. I was a rat in a cage. The stairwell door banged open behind me. Preston limped into the lobby. His face was a mask of horror, swollen, red, tears streaming from his eyes from the pepper spray. He looked like a zombie. But he had the gun again. He must have picked it up before chasing me. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve, squinting in the gloom. "End of the line, Meredith," he rasped. His voice was wet and gurgling. He raised the gun. I backed away, clutching the notebook to my chest. I backed up until I hit the reception desk. There was nowhere left to go. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you do it? Why my father?" "Because Sterling wanted the land," Preston said, walking closer, step by step. "And I wanted the retainer. Sterling promised me 10% of the development deal. Your father was a stubborn old mule. He wouldn't sell. He talked about heritage and roots. He was in the way. So I removed him." "You ran him down," I whispered. "I did. It was easy. Just a bump. And I slept like a baby that night. Just like I will tonight after I clean up this mess." He cocked the gun. The sound echoed in the silent lobby. "Goodbye, Mrs. Cross." "Wait," I said. "Just one thing." "What?" he snapped. "Any last words? Did you check your pocket?" Preston frowned, confused. "What?" "Your coat pocket. The left one." He hesitated. The confusion made him pause. He reached into his pocket with his free hand, keeping the gun trained on me. He pulled out a small, black object. It was one of my digital voice recorders. "I slipped it in there when I sprayed you," I lied. I hadn't slipped it in. I had thrown it on the floor near him upstairs, and he had instinctively picked it up, or maybe it fell into his pocket during the struggle. It didn't matter. It was a bluff. But the distraction worked. He looked at the device, his brain trying to process it. In that second, the lobby exploded with light. Red laser dots appeared on Preston's chest. 3 of them. Dancing like fireflies. "Drop the weapon," a voice boomed from the darkness of the mezzanine level above. Preston froze. He looked up, blinded by tactical floodlights that suddenly snapped on. "FBI. Drop it or we shoot." Preston looked up. Officers in heavy tactical gear were rappelling down from the second-floor balcony. They had been in the building. They had been waiting. I slumped against the desk, my legs finally giving out. My phone in my hand was glowing. The call was active. "Agent Ramirez?" I whispered into the phone. "Did you get that?" "We got it all, Meredith." Monique Ramirez's voice came through the speaker, crisp and clear. "We've been tracking Preston since he made bail an hour ago. We tapped the building security. We heard everything. You did good. Now stay down." Preston realized it was over. He looked at the gun in his hand. For a second, I thought he might turn it on himself. Or maybe try to take me with him. But he was a coward. He was a bully. And bullies don't like pain. He dropped the gun. It clattered on the marble floor, spinning away. He fell to his knees, raising his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot," he cried, sobbing. "I surrender. I'll talk. I'll give you everything. I'll give you Sterling. I'll give you the judges. Just don't shoot." The agents swarmed him. They slammed him to the ground, boots on his back, cuffing his hands. Agent Ramirez walked over to me from the shadows. She holstered her weapon and offered me a hand. She looked at my bleeding feet. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I looked at Preston, who was being dragged away, weeping like a child. "I am now," I said. I handed her the red notebook. "Here. This is what he killed for. This is the evidence." The fall of the House of Cross was absolute and irreversible. With the red notebook in federal custody, the dominoes fell fast. Preston Hayes, facing a murder charge and the federal death penalty, turned state's witness against Sterling to save his own skin. He spilled everything. Every bribe, every stolen dollar, every illegal deal, every body buried, figuratively and literally. But it didn't save him. Preston was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died 3 months later in his cell, a heart attack, they said, though rumors swirled that he had crossed the wrong people on the inside. The butcher was finally butchered. Sterling Cross, my Prince Charming. He took a plea deal to avoid the electric chair for conspiracy to commit murder. He got 30 years in federal prison. The last time I saw him was at the sentencing. He looked old. His hair was thinning, his skin gray. He looked at me with hatred, but I just looked through him. He was a ghost. He was nothing. Tiffany Sparks? She lost everything. The government seized the Orion Group assets. The sapphire necklace, the cars, the house in the Hamptons, all gone. She was indicted for conspiracy to launder money. She avoided jail time by testifying against Sterling, but her reputation was destroyed. Last I heard, she was working as a hostess at a diner in Jersey City. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. As for me, I didn't keep the money. Not all of it. I liquidated Sterling's personal assets, the yachts, the planes, the mansions. I used the money to refill the employee pension fund, plus interest. I paid for the college tuitions of the children of the employees who had been hurt by the fraud. Then, I did something that made the cover of Forbes. I converted Sterling Dynamics into an employee stock ownership plan, ESOP. The company wasn't mine. It belonged to the people who built it. The truck drivers, the warehouse workers, the secretaries. I kept the house in Queens. The house on the waterfront. I renovated it. I didn't sell it to developers. I turned it into a community center for at-risk youth, named the Walter Vance Center. It's been a year since the trial. The leaves are turning gold in New York, painting the city in shades of fire. Yesterday, I drove out to the cemetery. I drove my own car, a sensible sedan, but with my own salary as the chairwoman of the board. I walked over the crunching leaves until I reached a simple, well-tended gravestone. Walter Vance. Beloved father. Guardian of the land. I knelt in the grass, not caring about the dirt on my jeans. I placed a copy of the court order on the grass next to a bouquet of fresh lilies. I got it back, Daddy, I whispered, touching the cold stone. I got the land back. And I made them pay. They won't hurt anyone ever again. The wind rustled the trees, and for a moment, I felt a warmth on my shoulder, like a heavy hand resting there. I stood up, wiping my eyes. But they were tears of relief, not sadness. I wasn't the waitress anymore. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the crazy wife who needed pills to function. I was Meredith Vance. They say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. But they are wrong. Fury is loud. Fury is chaotic. Fury burns out. What I had was something worse. I had patience. I had a plan. And I had a notebook. Sterling and Preston thought they were untouchable because they had money and power. They forgot the most important rule of survival in the wild: you never, ever corner a mother who has lost her child, or a daughter who has lost her father. I walked back to my car, the sun setting over the city skyline, a skyline that no longer cast a shadow over my home. I was free. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it reminds you that no matter how small you feel, you have power. The truth is the most powerful weapon you can carry. If you enjoyed this story of justice served ice cold, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, do you think 30 years was enough for Sterling, or did he deserve life like Preston? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay strong, and keep your receipts. Looking back at Meredith's journey, we see more than just a legal victory, we see the triumph of human dignity against overwhelming greed. This story serves as a powerful reminder that silence is not weakness, and patience is not submission. Often, the world underestimates the quiet ones, mistaking their kindness for fragility. Yet, true strength is not found in how loud you scream, but in how meticulously you prepare when the world tries to break you. It teaches us that our value is never defined by how others treat us, but by the courage we summon to stand up for ourselves when our backs are against the wall. Let this be a lesson to never let anyone underestimate your intelligence or your resolve. You hold the power to rewrite your own narrative, no matter how dark the previous chapters have been. We hope this reflection has ignited a spark of resilience within you. If you found value in this message, please share your thoughts or simply comment the word good below. Your interaction helps spread this empowering message to those who need it most.